can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100,000.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders like the founders of Atari, Zapier, P90X, and many more, and how they overcome big challenges in life and business. This episode is brought to you by Rise25, which I co-founded with my business partner, John Corcoran. Rise25's mission is, what our superpower is, really, Ross, is we help people connect their best referral partners and customers to businesses. And so we do it in three ways. We do a done-for-you media piece. Basically, we run a company's podcast. We help them launch their podcast. We run it. We distribute it across 11 different channels. Dedicated blog post goes with each episode, social media. So the person can simply show up and talk, and we do everything else. Our team has been working with podcasters since 2009. I personally credit podcasting as the single best thing I've done for my business and my life. It's allowed me to connect with amazing people like you and other founders, and making best friends, finding my business partner, just countless relationships. So I think if you don't have one, everyone should have one for sure. We also have a done-for-you lead generation service where we manually reach out. It's not paid. Manually reach out to send consistent flow of customized outreach messages to your ideal clients and referral sources. We also do done-for-you VIP events with larger conferences. We partner with software companies or larger conferences and help them bring their highest level people in the room to connect and collaborate. We've even shown up in Elvis costumes. I don't know if we'll do that one again, but I know Ross and his team, I basically see them everywhere at all the conferences. They obviously see the value of going and getting face-to-face. And it does require a lot of humans to do what we do. So we only look for and work with the right company. If you have questions or you're interested, go to support@rise25.com and email us. I'm especially excited, Ross, today. Been doing a lot of research. I've seen you guys everywhere. You are everywhere. Today we have Andrew Paquette, founder of Maropost, and he founded Maropost in 2011, so I want to hear what the landscape looked like in 2011 as an email service provider. But it quickly grew beyond the original vision, and they help simplify customer engagement for companies across the board with their technology. So we'll talk about how the kind of the evolution of the product, because it used to be email, and now they basically handle it. We'll talk about single customer view, because really that's what they allow companies to do. And they became one of the fastest growing companies in North America without ever raising funding. So we'll talk about Ross's opinion on bootstrapping versus raising money. And Maropost is trusted by companies like the Golden State Warriors, Mercedes-Benz, Livestrong, the New York Post, and even smaller teams growing like ZipBuds. And they are also working to make philanthropy more efficient. So they're going to use their superpower technology for the good, greater good of the earth, really, and they use their technology to power nonprofits. And Maropost Cares is a nonprofit focused on giving endangered species a second chance, restoring ecosystems through conservation initiatives that they have. So, Ross, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
I want to go back to 2011, or even a little bit before 2011. What was the original idea behind Maropost?
Yeah. So the original idea was actually to build more of a lifestyle business at the time. I come from a background in sales. I was working for a similar company selling, email marketing automation, and really saw a gap in the market in terms of the support side of things. That was really kind of the starting point to it all, where I could probably have 10 clients, sit by the pool all day and support them and really just kind of carry on from that perspective. And of course, that quickly grew. We kept developing our platform. We kept selling, of course, our service. And over time, we just grew by referral for the most part. So we had a really explosive, few years. We went from, kind of zero to about 20 million in revenue with a very small team.
Wow.
And it's been exciting, needless to say. It's been very exciting.
So were you growing up your typical entrepreneur?
Not at all. No, I'm actually from a really small town in northern Ontario. in Canada, no less. But not a lot of entrepreneurs coming out of there. Certainly not a lot of tech entrepreneurs coming out of there. So really, that was never one of my goals. It just kind of happened.
Your parents weren't entrepreneurs?
No, my father's a dentist, so somewhat entrepreneurial.
So is mine,
but not entirely. Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I think is Mark Zuckerberg's dad a dentist too?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
That's a great question.
Maybe it's like this thing. I don't know. But
yeah,
I mean, he had his own business, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with dentistry, very much are running a business, but I wouldn't say with the same kind of issues that may come up with a technology suite and having to function across kind of North America or even the European landscape.
Yeah, I remember a lot of lessons around the table of someone who has their own business. Any stick out from your dad?
I certainly got. Sorry.
Yeah, any stick out from your dad of what he's kind of instilled in you or talked to you about?
Certainly the work ethic side of things. I mean, he was the at work by 8 a.m., home by 8 p.m. type of individual. So in the earlier stages, he was very much, focused on that side. Sorry, he still is to this day. He's 73 now and still does the same thing day in and day out. I mean, a little bit more travel, thankfully. But, still the same.
So I
certainly that work ethic side of things.
Yeah. So it went from email. What was the next kind of iteration?
Yeah. So the one of the core, kind of aspects that I've always been super excited about was the automation side of things. And when I say automation, I mean more of that drag and drop atmosphere. I mean, in 2011, there weren't, there were very few companies who had anything in that, kind of arena where you could drag in different nodes and build a process flow around it. So that was one of the key elements that I really wanted to get into quickly, and that certainly happened. And then over time, of course, things like social come up, and then mobile comes up, and then customer acquisition, and then surveys. So, given all of that, those areas are really tied together, that was sort of the evolution of the first, kind of the first product or the first suite that we developed, which was more around, again, the marketing or digital marketing side of things.
I was shocked, by the way, Ross, when I learned through my research how you found your CTO.
Yeah. So that's always an interesting one. I mean, that will certainly go down as one of the, either luckiest or greatest moments in my life. You go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the company already existed. So Maropost was already, heading on, and I was working with another individual, and that just didn't, wasn't working out. And then I was actually working at another company at the same time. So I had a full-time job. And, while we were running through those issues, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just close things down here. This didn't work out, and I'll go back to work, and that is what it is. And then it was actually, coincidentally, we were talking about my parents. It was them who said, hey, why don't you, look online. And our product in the early stages was built mainly in Ruby on Rails or in Ruby. Mm-hmm. And, I was thinking there's nobody in North America that's really focused on that. It wasn't, popular at the time. To say it even really ever got super popular over here is another conversation altogether. So I went on to Odesk, which is now Upwork, and he was the first person I talked to. And I was just putting it, hey, does anybody know how to develop in Ruby that, can help with an email marketing platform? And within 2 weeks, he turned things around in terms of the technology side of things, and, the rest is kind of history there. But he's actually now lives in Canada as well. So he moved there and he spends time back in India and in Canada as well.
Upwork should feature, they're public now, right?
They really should, actually.
Upwork you should reach out to them. They need to feature you as a success story. Look at the company we built from your platform. I said the introduction of the platform.
Yeah.
We have to reach out today. Get them on there.
Yeah.
At what point did you, and I know we'll talk about kind of the bootstrapping conversation versus raising money. At what point did you decide to quit your job? And was that a big decision for you?
It wasn't because the company, again, we had a couple customers, and then, and they knew what I was trying to do, and they got on board early on. And so they were kind of in a way funding it. They were using it, of course, in the early stages. But it was really just a natural progression. We hit a kind of revenue, benchmark, and it was like, Ross can now spend 24 hours a day on this. And it wasn't really, there wasn't a decision that went into it. Certainly there was no, should I keep doing this? Should I stay or should I go in a way? It was very much just, hey, we hit this point, this makes sense now. Let's just keep moving. So there wasn't a ton of, it wasn't a strenuous decision around what I should do. Because coming from a sales background, right, there's plenty of opportunity out there for great people in there. And I'd been very successful and fortunate to be very successful on that front. So it was quite simple.
So I'm going to bounce around to the product, to the team, because I know you're really into team building and culture. Talk about the evolution of the team. So it's you, and then you have a technical. Tell me how it grew from a team perspective.
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. So one thing, of the very few things that I would go back and do differently is it was a handful of us for a very long time. Much longer than I think most, companies would ever get by on, certainly from the customer count perspective or the revenue perspective. So it was around 2016, so 4 or 5 years later when we first started, bringing on more people. And I don't mean a lot more people. I just mean more than, 5 to 10 kind of thing.
Yeah. What did that core look like before then?
Yeah, it was really just him and I and maybe a couple of others, but nobody from a real kind of senior leadership, perspective. We really only started to focus on that about, 24 months ago now, maybe a little bit longer.
It's pretty remarkable, Ross.
Yeah, it was really unique.
Were you just wearing a lot of hats in those days?
For sure, yeah. I was the sales rep, the customer service rep, the finance individual, the HR individual. There was definitely a lot of hats. So, but that was that was definitely an exciting time for its own reasons. I wouldn't have done that part any differently. But once you start to bring in individuals who can really take control of individual departments or start to cross departments and of course working together. The economies of scale just really shoot through the roof. And, while I wouldn't go back necessarily and do anything differently, if we had done that earlier on, I can only imagine where we would be today, beyond where we are. But, of course, that's our path, and we continue to advance it today.
Outside of that original group that you saw the exponential growth, what was a key hire? What were you thinking about hiring after that core group?
Yeah, so I'd say there's a number of hires. I mean, of course, we now have a SVP of sales, SVP of marketing. We have a VP of HR. We have I have a COO slash CFO, same individual. I'd say it would be that last role in particular because of sort of my style, not necessarily from a management perspective, but just what it took to get the business to where it was. During that time, you can't really take a step back because it's just all go, no stop, bring in customers, make them successful. And you can't even take a step back to say, what does the team look like? Is everyone happy? How are they performing? There's really not a lot of room
wake of bodies behind you.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah. Yeah. So when, when that individual came on board, he really had the ability to to handle that aspect and really focus on, okay, how do we start to clean up this sort of wake that you're referring to, and make sure that, that doesn't exist anymore. Make sure we can start to channel, that vigor that I have in the right way and the right areas and with the right people, backing you. So that was a unique kind of shift because, again, there's the conversation, doesn't matter what revenue is, whether it's, 0 to 20 or 0 to 30 and then 30 to 100. There's different, personality traits that are required for each of those levels. And, there's a lot of, whether they're CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, once they get to a certain point, it's like, it's hard to step back and say, okay, now I need to shift my view and do things differently. And the faster you can do that, the better off you're going to be, the better off your team is going to be. And of course, you start to go down the field, which, relates to your customers as well. So really important, aspect, at least how I see it.
Ross, what has worked, as your team grows and you try and keep a really good culture and do team building, what's worked for the team building culture and what have you felt has not worked as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, just focusing on the team itself is the one thing that does work. And so when I say focusing, is in giving them the room to make decisions, good or bad. Hopefully they're all good, best case scenario. Being able to work together, being more, when I say more collaborative, I just mean in a positive manner, of course. You can always, again, I think what happens with a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, is they're used to doing everything on their own or doing many things on their own, wearing a lot of those hats. And, so when you bring somebody in to say a finance role, you have to trust that they're not going to do everything exactly the way you expected them to. And I think that's where you see a lot of turnover in those early stages, is where, somebody or the founder, entrepreneur, executive, whatever you want to call them, hasn't again, become open-minded to, hey, maybe we're gonna lose some revenue, maybe we're gonna lose some customers, maybe we're gonna make a couple bad choices here, maybe our reporting is gonna be out. There could be any number of things. Taking that step back and saying, but I'm okay with it. You're never really okay with it, but you got to take the step back and say, I'm okay with it. Otherwise, you'll just never make that leap to sort of the next stage.
Are there certain hiring practices that you've discovered that you'd recommend? Because it kind of goes back to, if you give them room, it's because you probably hired the right person, I imagine.
Yeah. Yes and no. But on the hiring practices side, so that's always a unique conversation for me. I am the worst person when it comes to hiring.
Why do you
Because
say
that? I take everybody at face value, right? If somebody shows up and they're like, yes, I can make your dreams come true, I'm just sitting there going, yay, this is amazing. He or she is going to make my dreams come true. They sound great. And then 6 weeks later, I'm like, so what happened to all the dreams coming true? And, things aren't panning out as good. And so you really have to, and I passionately agree with this. It has to be, relatively as much as you can, be a team approach, as in having multiple people from whatever avenues you can, whether it's people from your board, whether it's, people, from an advisory perspective, of course, people from the team, if you do have a team, getting all of those, views and positions so that you can better make that decision. Trying to just, again, in my case, going at face value is one thing, but, trying to make that decision is, it's significant, because one wrong hire and you're a year behind, two wrong hires and hopefully you're not 2 years behind, but they just start to compound on each other. And that's, I think when you start, as a founder or entrepreneur, once you get the organization to a certain point, going backwards is not an option. And that is probably the fastest way to go backwards.
So you've changed the hiring process to incorporate more individuals throughout the steps, or?
Yeah, and I realize that may sound like common sense, but a lot of the people I talk to, and again, kind of the SMB mid-market as they're going into it, they really don't do that. They go on their own instinct, their own gut. And of course, some people are probably more successful or have been more successful at it than I, and some people have been less. But, the more you can put a really strong process around it, the more it's going to be valuable. And I do think as well that, this was a really tough one for me, but sometimes investing in a recruiting firm, obviously you want to have a strong recruiting firm, can pay for itself overnight, just with the right people. Of course, nobody wants to get a bill for $50, $80, $100,000 for one hire. When you hear that and you're in the, 1, 2, even 5 million stage, you're like, we could hire a whole person for a whole year for that amount. It's a big jump to move over there. Because again, if you're a founder entrepreneur and you're bootstrapped, that's literally your money.
So how do you make that decision? Difficult. Whether you take the lead. I mean, you personally, do you decide to hire someone specifically for that at that point, or do you hire
I took the harder road. So the harder road was, no, I think we could do it on our own. And, again, and then we get to a point where you just say, okay, we got to try something different. And this is different. So let's try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Yeah. And if it does, great. But, again,
so you did both, that effort, essentially.
Yeah, I did the wrong way, and then I did the right way for us.
Yeah. Bootstrapping versus raising money. Your philosophy on that?
Yeah, so that's again, yet another passionate topic of mine. I would love to see more companies, especially in the tech space, bootstrap. It's becoming, more rare, as the days go by. There's just not enough of it. It's too easy to raise $50 million. I just got an email literally 2 hours ago about a competitor of ours raising $50 million right after they raised $60 million like last year. I'm like, where are you spending all that money? Like, are you swimming around in it? I assume you'd have to be at that point. So, for me, again, coming from that background, I would love to see more companies like that. I'd love to see, more founders, entrepreneurs. I'm not a big fan of the, jump in, raise $5 million, grow by all costs, then 10, then 20, then 50, then 100. I mean, there's too many stories out there like that. And, I don't think it fosters the right environment, right? There's obviously a lot of content out there around, San Francisco and groupthink. I mean, I see this as one of those pieces. Somebody thinks like, hey, I'm going to start a tech company and, it's either all or nothing. Like, I don't like that idea of all or nothing. Like, why can't we do something, or why can't people do something in the middle? Just build a great company, build a great organization. It doesn't have to be a home run or nothing. So I personally would like to see that. I think, if you focus more on building an organization, right? And I say an organization and something that is, maybe it's not going to be timeless, but maybe it could be timeless. As in, maybe this product is something that's going to be needed, for as long as possible. Maybe it's something that's going to be, industry defining in a way where you can keep, you can keep building it without the goal of, well, if we don't sell to Oracle or to SAP or to Salesforce, we're failures. I think there's a lot of that out there. Because I always wonder, I'm like, there's so many of these companies, or so many companies being started, where are they all going? Salesforce is not going to buy 15 marketing automation platforms, right, or 20 or 30 service and support platforms. I mean, what is your end goal at the end of the day?
You think some of them, they're, kind of positioning themselves as the end goal to sell to one of those, to Salesforce.
Most of them are.
Yeah.
I mean, most, and again, I'm speaking to the tech space, but most companies, their goal is to, in the tech space, are focused from that perspective.
Yeah.
So
what's been, you guys grew exponentially with a small team. What were some of those inflection points, and you're a salesperson at heart, I think, from early on. What's helped fuel that growth? Because most companies do not experience that crazy amount of growth.
I mean, there's two things. Obviously, just being persistent in terms of, from a sales perspective, we had a lot of benefits in the early stages from a customer referral perspective. So we've gotten a lot of our customers from our current customers, and that philosophy still rings true. I mean, I believe that, we're building stronger relationships with our customers that, compared to most other solutions, because I think, that it goes to the top in a way. I would guess that 80% of our customers I know personally, right? And of course, when you have 5,000 or 10,000 or more customers, that you really can't do that depending on your market. But because we're looking for, again, that mid-market, both in spend and in size, you can get to know them, whether it's an email here or there, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an on-site visit. Those things aren't that difficult these days. I mean, you can accomplish a lot, just as we are doing today on video. I mean, that alone is a huge leap from just an email, sending an email or a text message or even just talking on the phone. I mean, you can feel at least the emotion from the customer as to, what they're experiencing. If it's an issue-based system, if it's a positive, then of course you want to, experience that as well. So it was always, very much focused from that perspective.
What was one of the early customers you were especially proud of that you finally got in touch with and they started using your platform?
That's a good question. There's a lot of them. Mercedes-Benz would be up there for sure, just from a brand perspective. I mean, that's no different than having, a United, or maybe not United, an American Airlines or a United or something like that. The cars and airlines, I don't know if you ever watched Mad Men, but, getting your first car company, getting your first airline, like, those are huge milestones. Sports teams are the same, Golden State Warriors. There's a fair amount of those, right? Like and that's actually a great, question, because I don't think anybody ever asked that. When I think of the most important verticals that we function in, we have a top like a leading organization in all of them, right? We don't have an airline, I will say, but we have a car company, we have a sports team, we have leaders in the digital marketing space, we have leaders in the e-commerce space. That is really an exciting kind of piece to start to look at. Hey, what are our core verticals, and who is our top customer in there, and then know that your top customer is literally a top customer to anyone. So
which story sticks out as a salesperson that, there's an interesting story behind actually getting that client on your platform?
Yeah, that's another good question. So
like, maybe, I don't know, you're like, I was at, maybe it took like 3 years for the Golden State Warriors to finally, or whatever it is. Just something interesting is the persistent. You mentioned persistence earlier, and I imagine, you don't call them up and they're like, let's try out Maropost. That never happens. But just walk me through one of those journeys so people really kind of feel what it takes to get someone integrated and informed about your platform.
A lot of it is, the one thing is that there was never, there isn't really a story where it required, some long-term not excessive, but intensive strategy to get a customer, or Ross is showing up in the garbage bin outside the office, or popping out of the bushes or something like that.
It's like, hey, Steph Curry, out the press conference.
Are you interested in marketing automation? No, we don't really have anything like that. But there's, I think what was really exciting was, as soon as we show our platform or have showed our platform to some of these organizations, they immediately get it. There's no confusion. It's not really of course we're selling, but it's not a sales pitch. It's more of a show and tell. We're showing our platform. We're saying, hey, listen, we spend a lot of time focusing on the product and on the support side of things. We're not so great at sales and marketing for our own company. But this is our awesome product. And what do you think? And the visibility that they would gain throughout, let's say, a product overview was significant, because they would leave that call thinking, like, we're so excited to start using this. Like, how do we get on board very quickly? You mentioned you don't just call them up and they say, hey, we're just going to try out Maropost. That's actually kind of what happened at Golden State Warriors. Really? They were on a platform and they had 2 weeks. Sorry, and this is crazy, but they had maybe it wasn't 2 weeks, maybe it was 4 weeks to get off of that platform. That is extremely fast for an organization. Like, that's not even remotely normal for an organization of that size. And we made it happen. And we went into that meeting, or those meetings with conviction that we could make it happen, with the trust and the relationship that, they felt we would pull it off. And we did.
How did they hear about you in the beginning? How did they hear about you in the first place?
I actually am not sure.
Okay.
I know, I wasn't involved in that part of the process. Yeah. I honestly think it might've been a conference or some type of, there was some relationship though. They didn't just pick up the phone and call us and say, hey, we heard your name. No, there was certainly some lead time to that. But again, you don't really run into the scenario where somebody just says, hey, we've got 4 weeks to make this happen. Can you do it? Yes or no? Not at that size.
Talk about the single customer view. I know before we got on, we were talking about that and what that means exactly.
Yeah. So there's a huge, it's a big topic now that's certainly the focal point of most, individuals within the marketing space, is how do we better understand our customer, across all channels in one area, right? And some people are buying Tableau and some people are buying Domo, which are more dashboard tools. Some people are buying CDPs, some people are buying CRMs. But at the end of the day, they just want to, they want to log in there and say, who is Jeremy? How much is he worth to us? What is he doing? And how do we, increase his lifetime value, as an example, or increase his engagement, as an example? The easier companies can, of course, or organizations like mine can make that, for our customers, the faster they're going to start to understand their customers better. They're going to be able to target their customers better. They're going to execute their strategies significantly better. They're going to understand their personas better. And we really want to move into a state where, an organization can understand, can be told who their top personas are. I'm always hesitant to talk about things like AI and machine learning, but the reality is that marketing is, in many
ways. Why are you hesitant? Because do people throw it around as buzzwords? Or?
It's thrown around far too much. I mean, at the end of the day, machine learning would suffice, but you're just, the technologies that we use today need to tell us who our best customers are, to tell us when we should be contacting them, to tell us how we should be contacting them. And that's not really that difficult, but no one's really focused on it because connecting all of those data points is actually quite difficult, right? If you have a CRM and an e-commerce platform and a service platform and an acquisition platform and a web platform, like, bringing all that together as you're growing is quite difficult, and the big companies out there, the Oracles, the Salesforces, the IBMs, they're buying their way to that. Whereas we want to build our way to that. We want to build the underlying technology, and we want to build, of course, the front end or the top level of it. So that's very much our focus when you start to think about customer view, because then we can control how much information, our customers can see about theirs in a very simple, scalable manner. Scale is a huge component for most companies. Sorry, when I say companies, for most tech companies. I've seen countless organizations who have great platforms, but they can't bring on customers who are above a certain size, or they have to price it in such a way where it just would never make sense. Or, of course, the common theme is things start to fail. Reporting isn't rendering. Like, there's an infinite kind of number of issues that you can run into when you're trying to grow, and trying to adapt very quickly to that is something we've thankfully succeeded at. Based on our development and our tech team. So that's always really exciting as well.
What are the different pieces, Ross? Because obviously it starts off as an email service provider, and for you to really truly get a single customer view, and it sounds like you execute on that. And it's not just a dashboard. I mean, you have the tools internally that you can use to actually execute on those things. What are some of the, pieces within your system that are used? Because you have the email piece, the dashboard piece, what else is in there?
Yeah, so our two main sort of, I don't know if you want to call them channels, or kind of the centerpiece of the platform, on the is marketing and then commerce. So within the marketing arena, you have, email, mobile, so mobile being push in-app messaging, social being posting, listening, and so on. Marketing automation, of course, which ties it all together. You then have acquisition tools, so things like pop-up modals, landing pages, surveys and forms and that kind of stuff. But then on the commerce side, that's where we focus on, again, the single, not necessarily a single customer view, but the actual storefront. So that's this is again a new area for us. We have storefront solutions, we have order form solutions, we have payment solutions. So we're merging that together to create that single customer view on top. And then as we continue to advance, the platform and sort of the next stages, we would get into the service area. So that way, if Ross is logged in and he's trying to understand the lifetime value of his customers, he can do all of that. If he's trying to market to his customers, he can do all of that. And again, in the end stage, how do we also service those same customers? Because all of that information is relevant, right? I always use the example, like if I'll choose Lululemon here because I happen to shop there way too much. But, if I had a problem with an order, it didn't get delivered, as an example, and I call in, hey, what happened with my order? I want, personally, the support rep to see my profile, because they're going to say, hey, Ross, over the last 5 years, spent, $5,000.
Crap load of money. Give them a free T-shirt. Who cares? Yeah.
Well, not only, exactly. I mean, the first thing that you would want that person to do is say, this is a extremely large customer in terms of our overall. Let's, go the extra mile. Not he's the exact same as Jeremy, and Jeremy maybe just bought one shirt. It's not that you want to,
No, I totally get it. Some customers,
realities of business.
Yeah, it totally is. So it puts it in one place. But that's also, I think, from a founder perspective, a company perspective, a tough decision to make, because you have to deploy resources for each one of those things. So how do you make that decision? You could take like an AWeber that they just we're sticking to emails. I don't want to do anything else. We just want to do email. So how did you make that decision? It's hard to branch into all of these things, which is valuable for a higher level customer, like Mercedes or Golden State Warriors. Yeah. And you're you can't serve, maybe like a mom and pop, candy store or something because of it.
Yeah. I mean, the upside, I see here sort of two questions there. I mean, the upside is that, with the direction we're going in, you can really service a business of every size. I don't mean kind of starting up today and I'm at zero, I definitely wouldn't recommend that. But if you had two successful businesses before that and you use the same technologies, when we see this a lot of the time, is people will sign up for that day one because they're thinking, I'm going to spend 10 times more today than I need to, but I'm going to save 100 times more not having to think about this at any time in the future. The other side of the question now is of course more important, the decision side of things. So I tend to be a bit of a Tasmanian devil when it comes to ideas and direction, and that's where again the team and certainly actually certainly our COO helps me to kind of focus that. But I've gone through times where I'm like, hey, we're going to do all this, and then it's like, okay, that was clearly way too much. Let's pare it down, let's organize it better, and let's move forward with more of a plan. Or an approach to how we're going to tackle each area. I mean, in the best case scenario, you can do it all, but in the worst case scenario, again, you just have to take your time with it, and you have to make sure that I don't know if the question was sort of for everyone, but you have to make sure that you're not going to cannibalize the current business that you have. I can certainly say that in some ways over the past years, as we started to look at these other channels, we weren't prepared to bring them on board as much as we are today, as an example. So taking the time and really thinking about that, and had I gone back and maybe had a clear, sense of what was going to be involved, probably would have done things differently. Actually, definitely would have done things differently. So you do have to be really careful, right? It's again the old term scope creep. I mean that hasn't changed at all. I think we just use different terminology now to define it.
How do you guys get so much done? I mean, part of my question was sort of like, wow, like most companies can't get this amount of features into a product.
I think we have exceptional people, both in the development, on the product side of things. From a vision standpoint, we really have things organized from there. So it's the people for sure. I mean, it comes down to people. There's no technology solution or database environment that you can buy that will be more beneficial than just having great individuals at the helm. From that standpoint, yeah.
And there's a bunch of use cases, like you mentioned, Mercedes-Benz, Golden State Warriors. I want to talk about ZipBuds for a second, because
sure.
How does ZipBuds use the platform?
So they're using it in a again, as you mentioned earlier, like a more simplistic manner. So a little bit of automation, but mostly email. So not necessarily, the best use case, but the results that they would see would be significantly stronger than if they had a platform that was just for those tools. So what I mean is, they went with something that was, most likely more expensive and had more functionality that they needed, but they wanted to have, a team and a relationship with the provider as they grew or as they continue to grow. So, there's obviously so many different, types of situations where customers come in and what they're looking for. And, what we really do well is we try to focus on, how are we going to make them successful within not only their requirements, but like what we've seen others do, right? So they're coming in and saying, hey, what are you doing with, customers XYZ that are, 5 or 10 times bigger than we are, but clearly growing within their verticals or within their product categories. And we really want to be that, that trusted partner, that trusted advisor when it comes to that, not just here's your login and password, let us know if there's a problem.
They really value the strategic piece of it. I mean, this is actually really interesting, because the conversation I've been having lately is people just see it as just an entity, whether it's software or whatever it is. But the real huge value is the strategic piece. So talk about that. How does it work?
Yeah.
They're talking to your team and they're giving high-level advice. Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're looking at what they are doing, and really you're providing recommendations. I would say, my recommendations come a little bit more of a form of direction when I used to do that, because I've seen so much, and you want your team to come at it from that same perspective, as in, you don't have to do these 5 things, but if you do them, this is the impact they're going to make, whether that be revenue, engagement, or opportunity wise, and so as we continue to progress and get better at that ourselves, right, we want to put forth these ideas with the ramifications of what they're going to mean, so that it's, hey, somebody's getting promoted at an organization because of what they accomplished with Maropost, or, revenue tripled. And as such, of course, your business as well. So you're bringing in new individuals to help grow the company even further. There's a lot more you can do than just being, as you said, another software vendor. And I think a lot of companies, tech companies now are doing a good job at sort of, at making the process to sign up and start, completing the actions or the activities you're doing. But they very much moved away from that sort of consultative, advisory arena, right? It's easier to set up a self-service company today than it is to set up, more of an enterprise company, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So
it sounds like you're getting more and more e-commerce companies using Maropost.
Yeah, that's definitely our largest market, or vertical, that is. Yeah.
So are they using it similar or different from ZipBuds? You finding?
Similar, but probably depending on, again, where they are in the life cycle. Like, you would want them. The first thing you want people to do is start tying revenue back, right? So step 1 is bring all your customers in, bring their purchases in, and step 2 is organizing them based on audiences and segments and so on. and then how are you going to target, those people to, of course, increase revenue? But the goal, of course, is to say, hey, we targeted, 500,000 customers with this messaging, and we generated, who knows, $5 million worth of revenue, right? That's the goal, because as soon as you can, simplify the method of tying, those two numbers together, now you can really start to look at it and say, every decision we make is going to impact the revenue in a positive way. Hopefully not negative, but I've seen everything at this point. Yeah.
Who's ideal, Ross, ideal e-commerce company to be on your platform?
Really anyone who does, anyone, as I said, of any size, but, the sweet spot is really kind of that, 20 to 50 million in revenue, whether it's, about email volume, kind of they're sending, 5 to 10 million emails, a month, or 120 million emails a year. Maybe they've got, 500,000 or 1 million customers. It really comes into that range. So, physical products, of course, are core for us in terms of, really anybody actually that falls within that group. The e-commerce space is so large. So it's, again, it's anyone who fits into kind of those metrics.
Do you guys, I know we mentioned Salesforce and some other companies, probably have an acquisition strategy. What about Maropost as far as you acquiring companies?
Yeah, so I don't follow that philosophy as much. As much at all. I think, of course there can be situations, or I've seen situations, of course, where people are, you're acquiring a company for the talent, for the individuals who work in the company. You're acquiring a company for the technology. You're acquiring a company for the customers. But in all honesty, you can always find talent. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's certainly not hard to the point where you have to buy a company for it. You can always acquire customers. Obviously, having a successful marketing and sales strategy is going to complete that. And the technology side of things, I only see that as much now when you're thinking of, again, those large organizations where, they somehow have the resources to combine everything together, and they're creating, again, kind of a valuation or an equity increase at such a large scale that it's worth it to buy a company for, use MuleSoft. I think they were doing, I could be wrong here, but 600 million in revenue or something like that, and sold for 6.5 billion. Actually, I'm probably wrong. Let me have a look here. 300 million in revenue. So 20 times their revenue, 2017 revenue, wow, but purchased for 6.5 billion. And that will amplify Salesforce's position in terms of that, in terms of that environment. But I don't know a lot of people who have $6.5 billion. So, you kind of run into a unique situation where, valuation versus reality is very difficult when you're in, let's say the Maropost stage or the stage of, 99% of technology companies.
Yeah.
So I don't really, but the short answer to all that is I don't really believe in that as a philosophy. I believe that, that money would be better spent, focusing on your own technologies, your own customer acquisition strategies, and building from there.
Yeah.
And again, we're at a time where, we talked about this earlier, money is really cheap right now. So, and easily accessible. So it makes it even harder, to acquire companies because their valuations are as high as they've ever been. So, for a $20 million company, you're not going to, we were looking at somebody a couple of weeks ago, they want 200 million. 10 times revenue. Of course, they're burning capital from that perspective, and somebody probably will buy them. But I don't know a lot of people with $200 million just sitting around to acquire a $20 million property.
Yeah. So Maropost Cares, where does that fit into the picture? When did you start it?
Yeah, so that has not gotten as much, I guess you could say, time as I wish it had. There's, so where it started was, when I started to think about the long-term, plan at Maropost. So again, more of the, building of the organization. What do I want to, the legacy to look like in a way? My goal is not to sell off to another organization in the examples we were just talking about a minute ago. I want to leave something behind. Otherwise, why bother? I've seen massive organizations get just buried into, again, the Salesforce's IBM. Most people don't even remember them anymore, and they were, sold off or purchased just a couple of years ago. And that's great, for people who were exiting in those scenarios. But I would rather finish, kind of our path. And so back to Maropost Cares, that is sort of the legacy that we want to leave behind, right? And focusing, as you said, on environment and conservation and endangered species at the moment, and who knows where that will go. But I'm very passionate about both those areas. Of course, if we don't take care of our planet, we're not really going to have anywhere to live. So it doesn't matter if it's Maropost or any company. And we managed to kill off our endangered species, or at a near weekly rate these days.
Right.
I'm not laughing because that's funny. I'm actually laughing because it's sad.
Yeah.
And I would rather spend our time and our excess energy above working at Maropost, towards those aspects.
What are some things that you guys have done or seen with Maropost Cares for the endangered species?
So the main focus for now has been, ironically, sea turtle conservancy. So, whether we are, sponsoring individuals who go to certain areas throughout the world, Tortuga is a good example, where there's millions of sea turtles that hatch there every year, and they're making their way to the water, and they send people there to protect them. That's a main focus. There's a couple of Africa-based organizations that are protecting elephants, lions, tigers, and so on. That we haven't yet supported, but we want to, just in terms of the conservation efforts and effectively the capital that's required to just do so from literally a daily basis. So as I said, we haven't done enough. We want to do more. But, my feeling is that you have to get to a certain point before you can say, okay, we're now going to dedicate, whether it's 10% of my time or 1% of everyone's time towards those. And we're sort of cautiously moving in the direction where, we can start to then launch real programs where our employees can get involved. They can, of course, sponsor or recommend, or they can vote on organizations that they would want to support. And then, for the executive team, we can really get behind those and say, like, hey, our team, we've got 10, 15, 20 people here who are really excited about this. Like, let's all do something together with it. So that's really kind of, I guess you could say the current state and then the future plans for it. And then, the other thing that you mentioned is on the technology side, and this isn't sort of a piece about Maropost, but, the nonprofit space is probably the most poorly served, vertical within the tech space, because, most people don't wake up thinking, I want to service organizations that aren't generating a profit. Right? It's kind of an oxymoron in a way. So for us, we want to build, or not build, but like have our platform, be usable for nonprofits so that they can, have something that's easy to use, have something that's, innovative, have something that's, helping them to solicit, whether it be donations or sponsors or what have you, in a way that doesn't become, a massive cost center for their organization. And it's not that, we don't want them to have to, have a solution that they pay for. It's just, we want to make sure it's super efficient for them so that, again, similar to the revenue side, the more successful they are at soliciting donations, the more successful they are at completing or finalizing the programs that they're running. And to me, that's the most important bit. Same as, again, selling products at the end of the day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Ross, first of all, thank you. This is I love hearing your take on all these different aspects of business. And I have two last questions. Since it's Inspired to Insider, I always ask is, one, what's been a low moment, a tough time that you had to push through? And on the flip side, what's been a really proud high moment for you? Because in this journey, oftentimes we see, from the outside, people see the good stuff, but we don't see the challenges and some of the low points. Yeah. What's been a tougher time that you had to push through?
Yeah, I think, that's a tough one. I mean, it's not a tough one that it doesn't exist. That's a tough one in that I'd say when you run into conflicts with individuals, whether it be on your team or in some form in the organization where there's a philosophical difference of opinion, it's no different than having a partner where you disagree, on a specific direction. That is probably one of the hardest aspects, because there's no, if you're just on the opposite ends of one another, there's no there's not really a middle ground, right? When you reach a certain level, right? When you're in the early stages, I think, people start up organizations and they bring on a partner and they're thinking, yeah, it's all going to be, rainbows and unicorns forever, champagne for all kind of thing. The reality is, once more money's involved, you get to 5 million, 10 million, and so on. And people change, right? They change their direction, or maybe you never were philosophically aligned, and it's just coming out now. you don't have a lot of control over that. So I'd say one of the low moments or combination of low moments for me was certainly, being involved in a situation like that and having to make, a tough decision on, okay, well, how do we unwind whatever we did, or how do we change the direction of what we're doing? Because we're not going to get onto the same page, and let's stop trying, you know what I mean? Because we're just not going to get there. That's tough because, again, there's a lot of things involved. You've got, your team may be involved. There's finances that may be involved. There's risk, of course, involved. There's so many different moving parts there. And I would say that was, is probably that scenario for me, and those types of scenarios are probably the most complicated of an entrepreneur, founder, executive's life, because it's intertwined with your life as well. Like it's part of your fiber and your fabric, and getting through those can be very, well, sometimes you can't, or sometimes it's easier said than done,
right?
Like many things. So that I'd say it comes along with those kind of partnerships, or those high level relationships that sometimes you're just not aligned with. That was probably, I realize it doesn't sound as bad, but
yeah, that is the toughest part. It's the people, especially when it's, with you, it's a very high value with the team building and culture. So something involving, something that doesn't go smoothly with the people part is difficult. Would you go back and do anything differently, or it just is what it is type of thing? Like if you were to go back to that same situation.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it is what it is. It's hard to say, again, if I knew what I knew now, I probably would have done things differently. Yeah. I mean, I would have done things differently. It's not that I wouldn't have done it. I would have just maybe positioned things in a different way. But it's hard because you never know what aspects, whether they be, primary, secondary, tertiary, may have come from that decision at the time, right? And I think a lot of people would be quick to discount that and say, oh, like it just didn't work out. I wish I regret it, or I wish I would have done it differently. When in reality, they're not thinking of all these other things that pin on top of it. Well, if you didn't do that, would this have happened? Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't.
Some good came out of it.
Yeah, some good did, or hopefully it did. And that's all you can really hold on to is the positive, and then again, think of the forward movement from there.
Yeah. What about on the flip side, especially proud moments? Yeah,
I mean, everything related to customers is certainly a problem. When I say everything related to, I mean, whether that be the selling of the customer, the onboarding of the customer, the support of the customer, has always been super exciting. I mean, of course, you brought up a good example early on, meeting my chief technology officer. I mean, that's certainly, among, it's not that moment was it, but that relationship and what that's sort of become, and who we are to each other. Key. That's certainly.
And they moved over from India to Toronto.
Yeah. Well, it's not that of course, the 100% the relate. It's key, but I think for both of us, we would blindly follow the other end of the night, so to speak. And that's super rare these days. I mean, a lot of it's. I think that's an important quality to have, but it's really hard to get to that point. I mean, you don't see, I would have a hard time saying I do that to other people. I think, people would have a hard time saying that to me. So it's just a difficult thing for somebody to believe in. But because we had that so early on, and I've always had his best interest in heart, and he's always had mine, that it just kind of, got to that. So it's a very proud moment, both then and now, that two people were willing to like totally trust one another, and there was no, confusion or ambiguity or, ulterior motives or, strategies that one person was trying to play against the other. Was always just a very honest, approach, despite saying very few words to each other, as an example. You mentioned, not that we don't talk or anything, but
yeah, you mentioned customers as a proud moment. What's been a favorite in your mind customer success story? I know you guys have a bunch of, if someone goes to Maropost.com, customer page, you have a number of, really cool stories there. Which one sticks out to you?
One that's really exciting to me is a company called BioTrust. Have you heard of them before?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're really exciting to me.
They're a nutritional company, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. Nutritional company. So they're, I could of course pick some of the larger ones, the Rolling Stones, New York Post, Mercedes, and so on, that everyone would know about. But they're exciting because they generate so much of their revenue through our platform. and the way that they generate it. So as in their content is more story based, as an example. So it's more like they're speaking to their customers, as an example, as opposed to, selling their customers, as an example.
I get all their emails, Ross.
Yeah. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that's, I've always found that super exciting, because you built a business off of, and there's a lot of these that, we have a couple customers who generate 100% of their revenue through email and marketing automation. So it's exciting to me because of that, right? Because they're so, deep into an industry that I'm so passionate about, and that has given me so much, it's given our team and company so much, that they believe, philosophically that, this is, and it is the top channel, regardless of what anybody wants to say, but that they believe that, again, without, kind of prejudice or without any kind of, differing views. And so I'm proud of that, because we were, we and I were a part of that transition from, probably a $15-20 million company to, $150 million company. And, being there and working through that process with, with entrepreneurial individuals like the two founders there, was super exciting, because the things that they were doing, or the way that, the way they were approaching it with passion and vigor, is the same way I would do it. Right. So I could never fault them. Like, they would call me, like, they're in a panic. Something's not working, or we ran into an issue, or something, we sent to the wrong customer group. They're coming at it with such, excitement again, or not excitement, it's not the word I would use, but, such vigor, that I was like, yeah, if I was in your shoes, this is what I would be doing as well. And so that's pretty fun, really fun, because you feel a part of that, and the feeling, because I've been there before with another vendor. Like Ross has been there with Rackspace, or with Google, or with Akamai, or with some of the many, platforms I do. But I wasn't talking to, the CEO of those companies who built the company from scratch. And, they're like, oh, well, you've got to submit a ticket, and we'll have somebody call you. And, and so every company is different, but those ones were really exciting.
Yeah, the ones that some of them you were working one-on-one with the actual founder, and you saw them really build their company through that.
Exactly. Yeah. From scratch. Yeah.
Love
the other ones, like, again, the big companies, the Mercedes, like, they're established. Like, obviously we're making an impact with them, but the individuals that we're working with there, they're not directly, personally impacted by it. Of course, they're going to get, hopefully promotions and raises and so on and so forth, but they're not going to be impacted in the same way of somebody going from 20 to 150.
It's not their baby, so to speak. Like,
Correct.
This is their baby. Like, this, we've seen this, we birthed this thing.
This has to work.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it has to.
Yeah. Well, Ross, thank you. I appreciate your time. I know right now you're in Sweden at the time we're talking about this. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. And everyone should check out Maropost.com. It's Maropost.com. And where else should we point people towards online, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, our site is definitely the best place to find out anything about Maropost. I obviously am on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, cataloging some of my life, whether day-to-day or travel. So that's an area where I'm always excited by, because I think they're, again, entrepreneurs are some of them are really out there, but some of them, most of them aren't. And it's really great for, I think, the overall communities to see what's happening with these people on a, whether it be daily or weekly, but what are they doing? Where are they going? Where are they traveling to? What conferences are they going to? That stuff's all really exciting to many people, right? Who want to be inspired to, to do the same and see what that can look like for them.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out Maropost.com.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.